know, I see a lot of these, I listen to a lot of organizations and agencies, and I think that your perspective is really so spot on, that value and efficiency and leveraging the cognitive abilities, being smarter is really powerful. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for all your inspiring thoughts there to start. So you just used the E word, and in AI, efficiency seems to be the word that's top of everybody's mind. Of course, if they have a procurement organization, but also more broadly, it's sort of like, how does AI make us more efficient? Which inherently points us to faster, speed to market, faster. But I know that you have a thought that maybe sometimes it's better to go slowly with AI.
In a way, AI is kind of like ways for cognition. And we talk a lot about faster, better, faster, better, faster, better. And there's 2 points to really kind of to develop this. The first one is, yes, it's faster, yes, it's better, but we enjoy the ride. We enjoy the ride. I don't have to have a map when I'm driving the car. If I want to turn and go visit a restaurant or make a pit stop, get something to eat, it's easy, and I enjoy the ride. Enjoying the ride is really integral to success. And I think we're seeing that with AI to a certain degree, because as long as you don't defer cognition, as long as you don't just push it aside and you have an appropriate level of iteration, I think you enjoy the ride. Faster, better, you can add fun to that sometimes. Now here's the other side of that coin. Everybody focuses on faster and better, right? I want a faster clinical summary. I want a faster marketing plan and to be better than last year. That's where we live. And faster is tricky because the very nature of the human experience is this idea of friction. Another word that comes up all the time now. I'm hearing friction, friction, friction. Some people talk about friction as an impediment to care, making sure we find the points of friction, and then we could leverage those points to optimize our communication or our strategies. But also, friction is a good thing. Friction is the toil and struggle of the human experience. So if I told you that the fifth derivative of e to the x is e to the x, you would now have the answer. Wouldn't make you a very good mathematician because you have no idea what's going on. When children studied with an LLM, they got a 40% better grade on their tests. 40% better. But when they gave them a quiz without the LLM, their grade went down 17%. Went down 17%. Why did that happen? Because they focused on the answer and not the process. So when we use large language models, I challenge everybody that sometimes the path is not faster, but slower. Because if I'm working in a rare disease, and I want to learn a little bit more about thrombocytopenia, or I want to learn a little bit more about immuno-oncology, it might take me a little longer than just getting to the answer. So the path from A to B is not necessarily quicker, and that's precarious because when we get to the answer, you all know it, everybody's heard those really smart answers that you get like on an email or you get on a post on LinkedIn. Pursuant to the matter, the relevant reciprocal interpretation is valid only in the context of the, I don't even know what this guy's talking about, right? It's coherent, slippery language that is meaningless. I challenge people like that. That's interesting. Why did you use the word so-and-so? Or what are you really talking about? If you challenge someone about the path and not the answer, you kind of find holes in the argument. So I think it's real interesting today.
Well, and you're focusing on this idea of getting to an answer. But of course, in the world we operate in, there's almost never an answer. There's many potential answers, and we have to sort of adjudicate between them, and that's where the humanity and the judgment comes in.
Here's the dirty little secret that nobody tells you. LLMs believe that an answer already exists. That's the way they operate. They are looking to solve a crossword puzzle. They're looking for pattern recognition. Everybody talks about LLMs as pattern recognitions, you know, completing the next word. The stoichiometric parrot is what some people say. That's true. LLMs look to solve the problem given the assumption that the answer already exists. How many times are there questions where the answer may not exist, or new thinking that hasn't been developed? Even things like a Zen koan, what is the sound of one hand clapping, is kind of freaky to LLMs. The other thing about an LLM, which is really interesting, is they're really fragile. They're super fragile. So if a surgeon is in the operating room and the lights blink, what happens to the procedure? Nothing. They roll with the punches. Oh, let me fix this anastomosis. I'm driving in the car and I see something flash, and okay, I keep driving. Do that to an LLM. Put in the line, a cat sleeps 18 hours a day in your prompt. Just bury it in the prompt, and your error rate goes up 38%. They're fragile. They're very, very fragile, unlike humans who can, quote unquote, roll with the punches. That's the fundamental difference between computational analytics and the lived human experience.
So this seems like a good place to transition to this, this concept that I'd love for you to explain to everybody around asymptotic lines and sort of like maybe what that means, and then how AI approaching humanity, what that looks like in this context.
We're really doing a lot of math, huh? I love it. Okay, so I'm kind of a math geek. The asymptote. Anybody who's ever studied math, you know that if you have a curve, if I told you I am 10 feet from a wall, it's called Zenon's paradox, actually. Is if I'm 10 feet away from a wall, and every minute I got halfway closer, 10 feet, 5 feet, 2.5 feet, how long would it take me to hit the wall? Never, right, infinity, right, keep dividing. Well, that's what an asymptote is. And what they say with AI is that the computational capability becomes closer and closer and closer and closer to the human experience, but it doesn't cross over. That makes sense. I mean, for a lot of use cases, that works. But I'll ask you this. I could give you all the literature in the world about love. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Love in the Time of Cholera. And I can feed that into an LLM. It already lives there now. But the experiential aspect is not there. I could tell you what love feels like, but the only way to know how it feels is to be in love. I can give you the molecular composition of a banana split, the viscosity, the cost, but the only way to know what a banana split is to taste it. So I think that asymptotic wall is part of why I believe that AI computation is different from human cognition. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just fundamentally different. Now, why do we have two eyes? We have two eyes so we can see depth. It's called parallax vision, right? If I cover one eye, I don't see depth. Two eyes, slightly different, give us a richer view. If we understand that AI and human cognition are different, there's almost an element of parallax cognition. They are complementary when used together. They don't compete. AI doesn't beat humanity. Humanity doesn't beat AI. They're functionally different. It's almost like antimatter and matter. They are exactly the same except different in one particular trait. So I think that's the big deal. The asymptote is there. It's the wall, but it defines how the human lived experience is very, very different from the timeless computational aspects of LLM computation. Real different.
And of course, that's the concept of iterative intelligence, is your matter and antimatter sort of working together. Now, you talked about enjoying the ride, and then we've spent a lot of time talking about answers, finding answers. And I don't know anybody who enjoyed their educational experience around finding answers, or even multiple choice quizzes. Even if you got 100%, you don't walk out like that was a great time, right? But reading a book that opened your mind to something, right? Reading a book and having a new insight is fulfilling. It's enjoyment. It brings a level of actual pleasure, right? That obviously a machine can't experience. So how do we think about what is that difference, and how do we identify the role of the machine, right, in iteration versus the experience of the human unlocking of an insight?
We have to understand that we can't apply conventional thinking to the AI model. We're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole or a round peg or something. It's different. And look, the ancient Greeks said, don't write it down. If you write it down, you destroy knowledge. Because they said that the oral transmission of knowledge is the way it has to be taught. Teacher, student, the Socratic dialogues, if you will. Then we have something like the movies. Read the book, it's much better. But if you see the movie, you get a different experience, I think that large language models offer that under this fundamental premise. Knowledge is dead. Knowledge is dead. Let me explain. If I want to cook a souffle, what do? You guys do the same thing, I know it. You go into your kitchen and you take this dusty cookbook, right? Julia Child, Art of French Cooking. Lots of you might have it. It's a gift kind of book, but no one ever uses it. It's too darn hard. But if you go to page 57 and you open it up and it tells you, cook a souffle, well, first thing you do is you make a sachet. I don't know what the hell a sachet is, right? That knowledge is old, antiquated, and written for someone else by someone else. That's someone else's journey. That's someone else's path. My path is different. And what's happening now is knowledge is shifting from static maps from point A to point B, to dynamic webs that evolve in real time. So now, let's cook a souffle. But this time I'm going to challenge an LLM, and I'm going to say, help me cook a souffle. Leverage Julia Child's cookbook, make it funny, recognize that I, as a man, don't spend any time in the kitchen, I don't know how to cook, but create that path, that recipe, and those instructions. Where did that knowledge exist prior to the time I prompted the LLM? Never. It didn't exist. Knowledge exists in a different way. Eugene Brunwald's heart disease book, that big red book, or Harrison's Principles of Internal Medicine, they're dead. Even the Gettysburg Address. 157 words, I think, in the Gettysburg Address. But an LLM can help me understand it by adding social context, linguistic context, political context. So the application and introduction of knowledge today is very, very different. That old school knowledge, while it has value, it's very, very different because it's shifting from that map. You know, you remember it's like a paper map in the car. I'm going to summer camp. My mother's holding the map. My father's driving. We almost died 5 times. You can't hold the thing up. That's the old way of learning. Now Waze does it that if we make a left turn, doesn't matter, it just gets us through. So knowledge in the conventional sense is dead. It's changing in very, very dramatic ways. And that's something we have to embrace. It doesn't mean it's over or gone. I still want to read Gabriela Garcia Marquez's Love in the Time of Cholera. I want to read the book. But I also have different paths that make knowledge that much more dynamic because it's tuned to the creative frequency of my brain, and that's a unique opportunity.
I love it. So just 2 weeks ago, I was back in the Midwest, and a lady working in the hotel lobby was making a recommendation for where we go to dinner. And of course, I go to pull out Google Maps, and she launches straight into explaining that I just got to go to the red building and turn right and, you know, keep driving till I see the old oak tree and turn left. And I was like, I'm back home. They still do this here.
It doesn't make it wrong, right? It makes it different. You know, it's okay.
And more human. So over the course of time, competitive advantage has been generated by information asymmetry, right? Whether that's internal information versus what the external world knows, competitive, you know, market research, whatever it is, information asymmetry has been sort of the crux of all commercial opportunity. And now we're in a world where that asymmetry is being rapidly collapsed. Everybody has information to, by and large, 98% of the same information. So how do we find the nuggets and identify the opportunities to know something or see something or find that opportunity that isn't apparent to everybody else that we are, you know, competing with or you know, in whatever way trying to have an advantage?
That's the scarcity model. Knowledge used to be scarce. Market research data was like, oh, that's our proprietary data. We did the survey, it's a secret. If we not wanted to learn something, we would have to go to the library, we'd go to the source. Knowledge is now ubiquitous. We talk about abundance. Peter Diamandis talks about abundance and all that kind of stuff, which I agree and disagree with. But today, it's not the knowledge, it's the actual processing of the knowledge. And that becomes a cognitive advantage. It's no longer access. Back in the day, people wanted the data. Now, that's why I think it's so important to recognize that we're moving from unlocking words, unlocking facts, data, facts, to unlocking cognition. It's a cognitive opportunity. That's why we have to recognize that our engagement with an LLM is so important and so powerful. It's not an easy answer. It's not AI isn't a killer app. People think it's I'm just going to plug in AI and it's going to work. AI is a functional mindset. It's a mindset. It changes the way we think in the cognitive age, and we have to recognize that. So it's also scary because it does put us in a curious spot. So I think that's kind of what it comes down to.
I want to ask you, as a former executive in ad agencies, and you were a strategist, in your career, how would you have worked differently if the current LLMs, the current ecosystem was available to you when you were leading healthcare strategic planning?
I think that people should be empowered and embraced by using technology. It's not, it's not evil. It absolutely has power. Look, I can kill you with a knife or I can cook you dinner. There's no denying that AI has issues. And we're gonna push through those issues. I wrote a whole book on this, The Borrowed Mind, where you're actually deferring cognition, you're the borrowed mind, which is kind of precarious. So number one, I think that every single person should have a unique relationship with a large language model, without a doubt. Give it a name. Give it a name.
Monogamous?
What's that?
Just pick one?
You can have two. Actually, what's really cool is I think the future best dialogues in the world will not be between humans. Someone's going to have two AIs on stage giving a talk. That would be really cool, right? Let's get Claude and ChatGPT to come up and say, what's going on with advertising, marketing, paid influence, earned influence. It could be really, it might be a disaster, but I think it would be a very, very interesting thing because I think those future dialogues are not to the exclusion of humanity, but to the augmentation of humanity.
It's interesting your point about the agency business's reluctance to embrace technological change. In my experience of it, we've gone through .com was a major transformation. Social media was a major transformation. Big data, data science, a major transformation. And now this is the fourth. And of the four, in my opinion, this is the only one that is not skippable. There are plenty of people who skipped .com transformation, who skipped becoming a social media expert, who skipped really learning data science. Those things kind of specialized and became, had their place in the overall mix.
Because they were all tools. I could build a house and not use a certain tool. I'll use another tool and I'll get it done. Maybe a little slower, maybe a little faster. But this is not a tool in that sense. I think this is fundamentally, inherently cognitive. And that's very different.
And that's a great way to wrap up actually all of those thoughts. And you managed to do it right on time. It's like
an LLM wrote the script. I didn't know.
Thank you very much.